Today I wanted to present you the concepts of the programming and specifically the object-oriented programming. Uh, as you have already started programming, but mostly the structured one, some programs. Uh, so in this course, we need mostly to focus on the concepts, how you define the classes, objects, and using the paradigms of object-oriented programming. Uh, we will take examples in C#, and you will implement the programs in Visual Studio, creating the C# projects. Uh, so usually when you create the program in C#, you have the program interface with the files, a list of files where the programs is written. And when you have just a console application, you write the code in your window, then you run it, you run the code, and you obtain some results. Like this, when we have the several namespaces and, for example, several classes that are related to each other, or maybe they could be independent, but each of them defines some specific functionality, and it is directed on providing some result. What is important about your program structure in the programming language? You have some system namespace, and you insert some libraries that are necessary for you to run the code. If you use more functions, it is probably you need to connect more additional libraries, more additional files in order for your code to work properly. So the upper level in the program structure, you use the namespace like this, the system namespace. And you also, every time you use parentheses, inside which you write the whole your code like this. So the start of the code from the namespace and the end of the program here. And all your program lies inside the namespace. So here in this we have the class name, and it could be the name of your file or of your application. So the name of the application, and instead it is necessary to have one main function. So where that will be the key point for your program to start working like this. State void main. And inside it you write these arguments, string args. So then you insert when you write the command, for example, to display some information for the users who use your application like this. If you have the application where you want to have a sum of two numbers, you write enter the first number, enter the second number, and then you obtain the result of the sum of them. So here. So this is for interaction with the users. So after it, you obtain the result. Also when you write some programs in which you would like user to have the elements where it is possible to enter some values or some information, uh, it is also popular to have the Windows application. In the Windows application, you have like this, the window with the some form, and in this form you type in some values like this, the first number, the second number, then you would like to calculate the sum like this. So that's our that is our method, and this method will calculate the sum of the two numbers. And inside your form, you will have something like this, the class toInteger sum of the form like this. So it is this component is initialized, and you also have the class of your button. So like this, some button click. So this is the method. This method. When you click on your method, you will have some result of two numbers like this. So you just get the value of your fields, of the first field, like this text field. You get the value of this first field, you get the value of the second field. So this part is written here. And then you get the sum of these two numbers. So this, the structure of the program is quite clear and easy to understand. So we will work with it. So in the object-oriented programming and in the C# programming language, specifically types are also very important. Because when you define any variable, any constant, it should have some types that will define how many bits or bytes are allocated in the memory for this specific value. So like this, when we have our simple types, like this, the simple types are usually Boolean, like char, short, int, long, 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 float, double, decimal. So the first one, the Boolean, this type is the simplest one. It obtains only two values, true or false. So the char, it obtains only one character. So this can be like this, A, for example, A, B, like this, C, etc. Byte is usually obtains only 0 and 1. When you have short int, so it also will be integer is integer number. It could be negative and it could be also positive. The difference between like this short int or long int is the size of the bytes allocated for it. So also when you have u, so this is a oh, it is only the positive value, so not the negative one. And when you have the float or double, it is a number with a floating point, so it can start with the integer part and the floating point part, like this. So for unsigned integer, you need to have only positive values. So there can also be very complex type, like arrays, delegates, so interfaces. So these are the reference types, and they are the structure, the key element of the program. And one more important type, the so-called pointer type. You have probably already worked with it. In C# programming, this type is not usually allowed directly to be used because it directly addresses the memory. So in this way, C# gets you a warning that it is better for you to take a look whether it is safe to use the code or not. So you need to define that you specifically that you would like to use a pointer. So in this way, take a look. So here, when we have the value and when we have different types of value types or reference type, it is different in the way it is kept in the memory. For example, just simple value type, it is kept on stack, the so-called stack, and the reference, the so-called heap. Also, when you initialize them, when you initialize the integer number, you also usually initialize it with some value like 0 if you have the boolean type, like true or false. If you have the character, it can be the 0 character. When you reference when you initialize the reference type, you should initialize it as a null. And when you when you make a copies of the values and initialize them, so for example, you initialize integer e with some value, for example 17, then you would like to copy this value to another variable like g. So you write this statement, and in the memory for the g variable will have the same value like the e variable, but it will have the same memory allocation, so the same space in the memory. When you copy the reference type, so it copies the reference, so there is already allocated space, and you just have this reference variable as a so it will find the place in the memory where it is kept, so it has a reference to this place. And when you copy it to another variable, it will have the same reference as the variable you used before. So these are some specifications of types and how the memory is allocated. And also the values the types are different in the way how much memory is allocated for them. So here you can have a table where the specifications of different types are defined. So take a look at it. So next, let's take a look at the specification, the type like enumeration. In enumeration, you have the specific value, and in it you can have several, just the several values, like the list of values, and they usually the integer type. So, for example, when you create the enumeration color and you define several values like this red, blue, and green, so they'll automatically get the value starting from 0. So this range of values. When you have the enumeration like this axis, and you define that the personal starts from 1, like this, so the enumeration will be 1, 2, and 4 because you manually define what the value your next element has. So the first has a value of 1, the second 2, and the third 4 value. So then you define the enumeration constants. So like this, as a constant c, the color c, it will you assign it the value of 1, so the blue value.
Папа, я удостоверение не взял.
So the next important element are arrays. So I suppose that you have previously worked with it because it's one of the key elements, the key types of the object-oriented programming, the programming itself, because when you have the list of the values of the same type, it is better not to write every new variable having the value, but have the like this the list of values. So, for example, we would like to have an array with 3 elements.
Мы домой потом приедем?
So we need to write something like this, integer a, so initialize it with 3. Like this integer b, initialize each value as 3, 4, and 5. So take a look. When you initialize the array, you need to use the brackets, and the brackets before the name of the variable. Then you use the keyword new, then again the type, and inside it you define how many elements you would like to have. In this way, you can also choose not to define how many elements you would like, but initialize your array with a list of values, and then your array will have all the elements. Uh, so there can also be an array of references, and uh, so not only the simple types, but can be the reference types. So arrays of the reference type. When we would like to get the length of the array, we use the property length. So we define the name of the array, then use a period, and then we write the keyword length. So in this case, we will get the value of how many elements are in the array. For example, when we have 3, 4, 5, we have 3 elements, so our len get the value 3. So in C#, you can also have the several dimensions, and for example, two-dimensional array like this matrix. So we initialize it like this, in this way. So take a look. When we have the integer a, and we define that there will be 2 rows and 3 columns like this. So this is our rows, and these are our columns. So if we would like to initialize it with some values, we also need to write it in the parentheses. So, but we can also initialize the values as when we address, for example, a 0 and 1, and to assign it some value. So, when we define the length, so it will be the number of all elements in your two-dimensional array. And when we want to define only the length of the columns or the rows, we need to define the element like 0 and 1. So C# also allows us to create the array of arrays. So like this, we have initialize like this integer a with 2 brackets, and each of them have different each of them has different number of elements. So it is also possible like this. We have new integer 2, and the first one has 3 elements, and the second one has 4 elements like this. So as you see, when we just define using the comma, it will so we will create the equal number of it will be the square or the so there will be an equal number of elements in each row, and when we define only the array of arrays, we can be a little bit more flexible in defining how many elements in each one. So we use a new int for each new row, for example. Another very commonly used type is a string type. In the string type, you use the keyword string, and you assign some value to it, like this. When we have, for example, string Alfonso, you use the quotation marks. So it is required for you to use a quotation mark. So then you define it is a string value. When we have something like this, char, before char a, and we initialize it with the a value, we say that it is only the character type. It is a character type and of the name a, and it is initialized with the a value. So you can do the concatenation with the strings. For example, you have the one string and you want to concatenate it with another one, so you use a plus sign, like this, the first string and the second string, and the result will be the whole this string. When you would like to get the value of the specific character, you need to use the index. So like this string is also of the it looks like the array type, so you can address it like the array. So get, for example, value of the specific element, like this, the first one, the second one, the 0 one. You need to address it using the index. And when you want to get the length, you type s length. And you can also compare it using the equal sign. Like this, we would like to compare if s equals Alfonso. So we use this condition f, and inside it we type the name of the string and compare it to the value. So there can also be operations like compare to, index of, starts with, substring, and so on. So when you work with strings, you have a number of different functions. So one of the also mostly important elements is the structs. So the structs allow you to create a group of values, a group of fields that can have different types, and you can also do some operations inside the structure using the methods. So struct resembles much of the functionality or what classes have. So you can also have the fields values. So you can have the fields, the values of the fields. You can have the constructor when you initialize your structure. You can have the method inside it. So here you have the structure. The structure is defined by the keyword struct. So then you have the name of the structure. Here is a list of fields, and here is a constructor, how you initialize. So take a look at this keyword. This keyword is important because if inside the constructor you have these fields with the same names, for example, X and Y, so this will be the local one for this initializer. But if you want to address your fields like these fields, you need to use this keyword. And when you have the method move, for example, move to, you have also the list of also the list of parameters like A and B, and you also initialize your field with these values. So this is how you create the new object, for example, the name P, and you initialize it with these values 3 and 4. Then you call the method. For example, move to, and in this method you put, for example, these values like this. The next element that we need to discuss is the other statements. So the statements are also the key element of every program because you need to define what operations you need to do, what initializations operations, depending on different kinds of conditions. So when you use a condition, you need to use a keyword like if, else, and else if. So the if statement allows you to have a list of conditions, and each of them takes place when the condition is satisfied. So when the statement inside our parentheses is true, we have the value, for example, so the condition is true, then we go to the inside the body of the statement. So this will be our body of the statement, and here, like here, we initialize new value with this. So they can be different conditions and different kinds of statements. When the statement is not true, so it is false, we move to another condition. And so we continue to do it until we get the true result. So in the case you don't have the true statement, you should define the else and present the value, present the operation or message to users what has happened. but it is not mandatory. You can also have only one if. Then we have some condition. And inside the condition you have your body. In the body, you type all the rest of the code for this specific condition. Another popular conditional statement is switch. For switch statement, we have one value and different cases depending on the value inside the switch. So for example, here we would like to define the name of the country. For example, if I have Germany or Austria or Switzerland, we define that the language variable gets the value German. If we have England and United States of America, so the language is English. We can have also the null, for example, no country specified, and we use the default when no of the above statement is true. We use the keyword break, so we don't check the following conditions. We get out of the program from this. So we get out of the statement and continue the program outside of it. So it's also necessary to take a look at the loops. So there are three kinds of loops in most of the programming languages. In C# specifically, you have while, do while, for, and also for each. In your loop, the cycle continues until the condition is satisfied. For example, in the first, if e is less than n, and we want to count down the sum, so here we count the value until this condition is satisfied. As this statement is not true as this conditional statement is not true, we get out of the loop. Then we use a do while. The difference is that the body goes first and then we check the condition. So we realize these operations first and then we check the condition. If the condition is satisfied, we go back and also do the body until the condition is not satisfied. When the condition is not satisfied, we go out of the loop. For for statement, we need to have a line of this three parameters. The first one, we initialize our so we initialize the first value, then we have the condition, and then we have the increment. So in this case, we initialize a new variable int. It initialized by the 0 value. The condition is when e is less than n. This statement is true, and we continue to have the sum. For each statement is useful when you have array and you would like to go through all the elements of your array. For example, we have an array A and it is initialized by this by these elements 3, 17, 4, 8, 2, 29, and we use a cycle for each. We go through all the array, and we, for example, we would like to get the sum of all elements of the array. So, for example, the same for the string hello, we output the value of each character of the string. So there can also be the type Q, and in the type Q we add each new element to the top of it. So for example, we have the John, we have the Alice, and our Q contains these two elements, and we would like to output them. So the return statement is also important. In this case, we would like to get the result of the statement. This is usually we return the value of the function. For example, our function realizes some operations, and we would like to get the result of what has happened there. So in this case, we need to use the return keyword. If we don't want our function or method to return any statement, we define it the void type. So the function has a void type. In this case, it doesn't return the value, so we don't need to write the keyword. If we define that our method returns the value like this, the type of the value, so our program will ask us to return something. And in this case, the return keyword needs to be written. So when you define your function, it's also important to watch whether your function returns something or it doesn't return. So take a look at it. So this is our first part of the programming lecture. So please read it again. So you should probably know most of the elements of our presentation, but you will need to revise them in order to continue writing your program in the next assignments.